Welcome to Mom Alternative, where we try to inject just a little bit of sanity to motherhood and parenting topics online. Today we'll be talking about how you can tell if your baby is doing okay between appointments when you're pregnant, why people judge when you don't want to breastfeed as a mother, and why you probably shouldn't pray for a pregnancy if your relationship is already in a bad place. So let's start with this one. The title is the baby okay between appointments? How do you know your baby is okay between doctor appointments? It's not easy waiting for the next appointment. I don't want to get a Doppler because of various FDA warnings, among other issues. What do you tell yourself to cope? Now, for those of you who don't know, a Doppler is a little ultrasound device that you hold against your belly, and it can play the heartbeat of the baby out loud. So it's one of the tools that doctors will use, midwives will use, and so on when they're checking that your baby is good and healthy there during an appointment. And they're also available for people to purchase outside of that as a consumer product. Whenever I read one of these questions, especially the way that they're phrased, I always kind of want to go, clearly, the baby is not okay between appointments. It's only the fact that you go to the appointment that makes the baby okay. And if you never went to an appointment, you would never know that your baby is fine. Probably your baby is not fine the whole time. And I know that sarcasm like that is not very helpful for people. And I know that that is not exactly the kind of response that anyone is looking for. And I get that motherhood is associated, or like with motherhood come a lot of these extremely highly anxious types of feelings to the forefront. So I understand that all of that is kind of one of the struggles of becoming a parent. All that said, I don't know how we've gotten to this level as a society where we're so unbelievably dependent on doctors, on the medical establishment, on devices like a Doppler, just to understand that, honestly, in the majority of cases, nature will take its course, right? When you get pregnant, actually still, despite miscarriages and everything else, the majority of babies will still be fine and will still be born. We have somehow convinced ourselves that we can control so much of what goes on, naturally speaking, just because we have all of the technology and all of the tools and all of these ways of dealing with problems as they come up. And where that is true to some extent, and of course there are a lot of issues that can come up during pregnancy and during birth and during labor, etc., that you do need medical help for, and it's great that we have access to that. Somehow having access to these tools has convinced us that we need to know everything all the time, right? It's kind of ties into this intense desire to control absolutely everything about the process, and this belief that if I just know, I'm going to feel so much better. Ultimately, you cannot know 100% that the baby is okay, whether it's between appointments or even during an appointment. Like, doctors can miss things as well. Doctors may not see things that are there. And it could be that some kind of medical issue happens that can't be seen on an ultrasound, that can't be heard in a heartbeat. You know, you can never have absolute certainty of anyone's health at any time, including your baby, especially when it's still inside you. So this is one aspect of it. However, it is also the case that once you get past a certain point of pregnancy, once you are healthy, like assuming you're healthy enough, assuming that you haven't had any difficulties throughout your pregnancy to that point, the likelihood of you running into an issue is so minuscule that spending every waking moment worrying about what's going to happen is just terrible for you and for your baby. And not only is it terrible, it's just a complete waste of energy, waste of time, waste of worry. You don't need it. You don't need it at all. The fact that Dopplers exist as consumer products, honestly, I feel is a perfect example of how industry can profit over a parent's worry. It's a perfect example of them going, okay, we understand that you are anxious, and so here's a tool that actually doesn't really make you less anxious in the long run, because it can cause, you don't always find a heartbeat and so on, so it can create even more of the problems, and then you're even more dependent on our product, and more and more people buy it, and so on and so forth. So it's just really unnecessary. In terms of what do you tell yourself to cope, honestly, I do trust in the majority of cases, when there's something wrong, you will know, you'll feel it. This is the majority of cases. Now, I know that some people will be like, okay, but miscarriages, they happen. That's a miscarriage without any symptoms. That is so unbelievably rare that we've gotten to a point where the internet seems to have convinced a whole bunch of women that this is something that they need to worry about. It's really, really unfortunate. So in general, what I tell myself to cope is, number one, there's nothing I can do about it to change the situation anyway. If there is a problem with my baby, then we will deal with that. But there's no point in thinking about the potential of there being a problem before there is one. And number two, the likelihood of it happening is very, very, very low. And for the majority of women, again, assuming you're healthy and assuming you don't have any other problems. And number three, tools like Dopplers exist so people can profit off of your anxiety and worries. So I will not buy into that. That's me. You can see here the comments, what other people say. The first person replies, early on in my pregnancy, I had the same worry. It's so hard to tell what's going on when you can't feel movement. 4 weeks between appointments seems like forever. Now, once upon a time, by the way, like this is my aside here, people did not have appointments, and people did not have appointments at anywhere near the same level of regularity that we have appointments now, that we check up on baby's health so often that we have the ability to do that is already a privilege, is already a luxury, already doesn't exist in the vast majority of the countries in the world today. To continue reading, she says, I just had to tell myself that everything would work out how it's supposed to. I had to keep myself from worrying and stressing myself out too much because I didn't want to cause any issues to myself or my baby. I did use a Doppler when I was most worried just to make me feel better, but it wasn't often at all. How far along are you? And then OP replies, she's at week 9, which is pretty early in your pregnancy. But maybe this is something that can help people actually looking at the numbers of miscarriage and the proportion of miscarriage that happens at different stages of your pregnancy. They do include missed miscarriage numbers as well. And you'll see that with every week later into your pregnancy, the numbers drop quite dramatically. So, it's one of those things where all you can do is just wait it out and see what happens. The next person says, someone once told me that women have been doing this for thousands of years and we need to just trust our bodies and surrender. She wrote buddies, but I think she means bodies. There is likely nothing that could be done early on, at least if there was something wrong. It's so hard, but I've been on Pinterest doing pregnancy and birth affirmations and I've really, really liked that. Hang in there. Your body knows what to do. This is very much close to what I would do. I don't find affirmations, like they don't speak to me to quite the same extent that they speak to other people, but I guess maybe they do speak to other people. So if that's something that helps you, go for it. But definitely this point of, we have been doing this for thousands of years. Every single person that exists on the planet today was originally a fetus in a womb for someone, and was born. Like that's the process that everyone goes through. And if it happens to 7 billion people normally, or 8 billion people normally, then why could it not also be normal for your baby? There's nothing about you that's so special and so rare that no one else has experienced it. That's one aspect of it. I'll skip a couple of comments here. This one actually kind of blew my mind a little bit. This person says, I have a Doppler and haven't been to the doctor in 3 months because of no health insurance. I finally can return to visit starting this week, thank God. But without the Doppler, I wouldn't have been able to hear my little guy's heartbeat every few days to check in on him. It really helped me through since I haven't been able to see him in so long. And she's 28.5 weeks pregnant. Now, the idea of having to listen to your baby's heartbeat every few days just to feel like you can get through the day sounds utterly depressing to me. I cannot imagine being pregnant and having that level of anxiety 100% of the time. Like that seems really, really unhealthy. And then this person replies, which makes it even worse. She says, my Doppler has saved me from myself and my crippling anxiety. Seriously, I get that a heartbeat isn't necessarily an indicator of good health, but man, is it ever reassuring. I use it daily for 1 to 2 minutes, and my OB said it's perfectly safe. After my doctor found my girl's heartbeat at around 11 weeks, I knew where to look and started finding it at home. I would be a mess without it. Now, she does say she had a missed miscarriage, and she found out that her baby had stopped growing early on. Her body didn't recognize it. So she says, without my Doppler this time around, I would be a walking disaster. It was the best gift I've ever received. Now, under these particular circumstances, probably the only situation in which I would say I can kind of understand why you would have such intense anxiety around pregnancy and why you would need something like a Doppler. I would probably say from a long-term health perspective that working through the anxiety is a better way of dealing with the situation rather than giving into it and then getting a Doppler to see if you can reassure yourself. Because again, what would in theory happen if you did one day not manage to find a heartbeat? If the baby moves and sits at a different angle, so the heart's in a different place, and now you can't hold the Doppler to the exact right position that you learned when you were at your doctor's, and then the fallout that you would have from that experience would be completely immense and most likely totally unnecessary. So that is what I would caution people out there who may or may not be listening to this. I totally understand that these tools exist and that they work for people, but also pregnancy should not be filled with that much anxiety. It really shouldn't. And the question of, is my baby okay between appointments? It's not, the appointments don't make your baby okay. So you can, generally speaking, assume that your baby is okay and then see if the appointments tell you otherwise. Just flip the script in your head a little bit. It's much, much better to assume that the baby is perfectly fine and perfectly healthy for as long as you don't feel any other symptoms of anything else, or you have any other reason to believe that something may have gone wrong, and then wait for the appointments and see if they prove you wrong. That's how I would go about pregnancy in general. Our next thread of the day is titled, Not Wanting to Breastfeed and Facing Judgment. First time mom here. I do not think I want to breastfeed, and I feel like I've been receiving backlash for it on other apps in the community pages. We all feel differently, and if I don't want to breastfeed, why should others feel the need to judge me or call me out for not giving my baby the proper nutrients my body was made to do? It's honestly really irritating. Anyone else facing the same judgment from others for your decision and not wanting to breastfeed your baby? Not sure what happened to women supporting women and mums supporting other mums. I know plenty of ladies who didn't breastfeed and their babies are just fine. So many judgmental Sallys out there. And then she has a little eye roll emoji at the end. I'm going to be a judgmental Sally. I can't help myself. So this is one of those perfect scenarios where I honestly struggle to put myself in the shoes of people like this, because I think they come at it from completely the wrong perspective. And so when she says she's a first-time mom, now as a first-time mom, I would be very curious to know how many people in her space around her does she know who have had babies. I mean, she says that she knows plenty of ladies who didn't breastfeed, but did she know them while they were pregnant? Did she know them while they made the decision not to breastfeed? Does she have any idea what the experience of breastfeeding is like? And the sheer conviction, that there's something about it that just screams arrogance to me, of knowing, oh, hey, there is this experience that's actually quite rare and quite special for people nowadays, unfortunately. And I believe that I know exactly how it's going to go. I believe that I know exactly how I would respond to it, despite the fact that I've never experienced any of the emotions or the hormones or anything else around the whole experience, but I know exactly how it's going to go. Therefore, I'm just not going to do it. And again, all this despite knowing that this is the better option for my child. It's just so selfish, right? It's so unbelievably selfish. Now, I have so much more understanding for women who go out there who try to breastfeed and who don't like it, who find it painful, who struggle to do it, who have crazy anxiety issues. Although again, I'd say maybe try to deal with the anxiety before you do other things, but that's a personal choice, however you decide to deal with it. If you try it and then you make the decision not to do it, then fine, fair enough. You can own that decision. I have absolutely no issues with people making that decision for themselves. When you don't even try, that's just so, it's just so unbelievably selfish. There is this part of me that thinks, okay, maybe like you owe it to your child to give it a shot, because we do know, and it is fact, that breastfeeding is the best option for your baby. Generally speaking, for the vast, vast, vast majority of babies, breastfeeding is always going to be the better option. Why? Because we also know for a fact that your body can naturally adjust the composition and the nutrients in the breast milk based on what the baby needs. That there's a dialogue that happens between the baby and between the mother. And that dialogue actually happens through the baby's saliva in contact with the nipple. And those two things together, they send signals to each other. So the mother's body, I guess, technically understands what are the antibodies that the baby needs right now, what's the level of like how much protein to how much fat does it need in the milk, because that will also change over the course of a baby's life. It is a completely different experience and a completely different mechanism than anything that you can get with formula. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't a role for formula. And of course, you know, if you can't breastfeed for any reason, the fact that we have formula available is amazing and we should all use it under those circumstances if the baby is struggling, etc., right? Has absolutely nothing to do with the formula aspect of it. But we know for a fact that this is the best option for your baby. And so when mothers go out there into the world and they're first-time moms, so again, it's not that she has ever tried this out, but you already go into it with this level of prejudice and conviction and belief to do something for your own benefit to the detriment of your child, without taking a step back and going, hey, maybe I can at least try it once. Maybe I can try it for a week. Maybe I owe that much to my child before I'm like, yeah, you know what? I can't be bothered with this. I find it very sad. And when she says, why should others feel the need to judge me or call me out? And she gives this quote of, for not giving my baby the proper nutrients that my body was made to do. That's why people should feel the need to judge you and call you out. You know, I truly believe that a little bit of judgment is healthy for a society. And this is one of those situations where a little bit of judgment is probably a good thing. Like, I'm very, very, very glad that we don't live in the kind of society where all moms can go, hey, you know what? I just can't be bothered doing this breastfeeding thing. It just seems a bit icky. I'm not really into it. And everyone around them goes, oh yeah, great, that's amazing. You should, why would you do that anyway? We have formula. Like, I think that would be a completely terrible response. And this other line she has, not sure what happened to women supporting women and mums supporting other mums. I don't actually believe that women should support women under 100% of circumstances, irrespective of anything they decide to do and why they decide to do it. And I don't think that goes for mums either. There's a certain level of support, which, like I said, I would have for mums who give it a try, who make decisions because they're like, okay, you know what, this is really harmful for my mental health. I'm a terrible parent. I'm a terrible person. No one can interact with me if I'm breastfeeding because I just hate it so much and it makes me so angry. And, you know, some people even have symptoms of that, like it's an actual illness that exists. Yeah, then I can understand being like, okay, maybe you should be a little bit supportive and a little bit understanding, and you should come at it from the angle of, I, as an external person, cannot put myself in the shoes of that person and say, I would make a different choice. Maybe there's a little bit of humility that you should have there, but that's it. That's the most that you can ask for. I know she hasn't given any context for her decision here, but the moment that you say, hey, I'm a first-time mom and I already know that I don't want to breastfeed, then that's as much context as I need to understand that you are making this decision based on your own preconceived notion and things that you've read and things that you've heard from other people of what breastfeeding might be like, and you are not even willing to give it a chance to make your own experience so that you can base a decision on that. So yes, I am a judgmental Sally. I'm comfortable being a judgmental Sally about this particular topic. I'll show you some of the comments so you can see that the rest of the internet is not actually on my side. First person says, you do what's best for you and your baby. This is not the only decision that you have to make that people will judge and make comments on. I do plan on breastfeeding, but I'm fully aware that it doesn't always work out, and I know not to be hard on myself if we struggle. I have a relative that works for Enfamil, and she's explained just how far formula has come, so don't worry about the lack of nutrients. That's just silly that people still say that. And obviously the source that I would use to believe that it's silly for people to argue that breastfeeding is still the better alternative for your baby is someone who works for a formula company. That makes 100% sense. It's exactly the level of research that you should do when it comes to deciding how you should feed your baby. I'm going to skip one of these comments. This one says, no judgment, but I would like to encourage you to try to breastfeed if you're comfortable with the idea. There's definitely pros and cons to both sides, breastfeeding versus formula. And if money wasn't an issue for us, we would have opted to formula feed. However, I tried it to see if I could, and I'm so happy I did. The bonding I feel with my baby when I feed her just makes my heart swell, and I delivered right before the formula shortages, so we kind of dodged that bullet. On the other hand, formula gives you a lot more freedom, since you specifically are not required to feed your little one, and anyone can make a bottle and feed them. I know it seems like there's nothing but judgment these days when someone chooses to formula feed, but breast isn't always best. If it affects your mental health or you and your baby's physical health, then fed is best. As long as he or she is getting a full belly, all the power to you. There are so many things about this statement that I agree with and still disagree with at the same time. So it's the part where she says there's definitely pros and cons to both sides. Yes, fair enough. A lot of the pros of breastfeeding are on your baby's side, which is great. And then some of the pros of breastfeeding are also on your side because it has physical benefits for the mother as well, which is also great. And then all the benefits of formula, generally speaking, are on your side. That's the thing that makes it a little bit more selfish to choose to formula feed. She says, if it affects your mental health and or your baby's physical health, then fed is best. I 100% stand by that statement. Yes, if it affects your mental health and or your baby's physical health, then fine, fair enough, switch to formula. That is to say, if you are unable to make breastfeeding work for your baby, physically speaking, because they don't put on enough weight and so on, then all power to you. And if you really can't handle breastfeeding, if it's really too much for you, then again, fair enough. But neither of these are relevant in this particular situation. So yes, I'm glad that this person felt like replying and saying, hey, I would encourage you to at least give it a shot before you make a decision. But that's actually essential. That's the reason this person is getting the judgment from me anyway, maybe not from other people. And this person also says, I kind of relate, didn't like the idea of breastfeeding really, and then tried it just to see if I could, and I loved it. The bond with baby is amazing. Not saying you can't have a bond with bottle feeding, and I found it so convenient being able to feed baby without getting out of bed during the night. I was heartbroken that I had to stop at 4 months due to medical reasons. Wasn't too impressed with the cost of formula and the constant bottle washes, but at the end of the day, baby was fed and happy, and that's the most important thing. And I would probably say that for the majority of women, you can't really understand or imagine what it's like as an experience until you go through it. Even if you see other people doing it, even if you read other comments from people, every single woman will have her own individual experience, and every single baby will have their own individual experience as well. You cannot compare. So this is one of those things where making a decision based on your own first-hand knowledge and actually going through it is kind of essential. And then I'm going to end with this final comment. The commenter says, nope, not me. I am not even going to try breastfeeding. I know me. I know it won't be good for me mentally. Plus, going back to work, it just won't work. I've heard pumping can be just as exhausting. I do know what you mean. I haven't told my midwife yet because I know it's going to be forced on me. I can't believe we make decisions about our own bodies and people feel the need to comment. God, it's just really, honestly, I can't handle this kind of statement either. So yes, you don't know you though. You can't know you because breastfeeding is a very different experience, because the hormones that are involved are very, very different, because you feel very differently about it, because breastfeeding a 1-week-old baby is completely different as an experience from breastfeeding a 6-month-old baby. And I believe truly that anyone who has breastfed any baby for any amount of time will tell you that. So yeah, okay, you know, if you think you know you quite that well, then fine, fair enough. You can make your own decisions with your body. No one will force you to do anything else. Even if your midwife judges you for choosing otherwise, she cannot force you to do anything, and no one is trying to force you to do anything. So yes, people feel the need to comment because sometimes people make dumb choices, and that's okay. It's okay that people feel the need to comment. If you are so convinced that what you're choosing to do is the right thing, then you wouldn't feel so triggered when people don't agree with you. And I would actually probably say that to OP as well. The fact that it's making you so angry and it's so irritating to you that people are judging you for this says to me that there is some element of you that thinks that probably that there's some truth to it. If you really believed that they were completely wrong, you'd have a much easier time dismissing them and not taking it too seriously. So yes, maybe I'm a little bit mean about this one. I just wish that people didn't come into breastfeeding with this level of preconceived notions and just being so completely sure of yourself of something that you've never experienced. It's just not a good attitude to have going into pregnancy, going into motherhood, going into life in general. Our next thread is titled, Prayed for a Pregnancy and Forgot to Pray for a Husband. After being diagnosed with PCOS, I really thought the idea of having another child was completely out the door for me. Not to mention the guy that I was dating was on testosterone, and we thought that that made him sterile as well. I was hopeful that I could get pregnant and prayed and prayed and prayed over again for the opportunity to bless another child in this world. Despite going through difficulties in my relationship, I was willing to overlook them so that I could have a baby. Well, In January, I finally decided that this summer I was going to spend time alone, traveling the world, and calling it quits with my relationship. My dreams of having another child really resulted to either going to a sperm bank or adopting. I pray that God sent me, I prayed that God send me a sign whether to leave this relationship or not. Then came the positive pregnancy test. I've been beyond grateful and blessed to be now 13 weeks pregnant, but my relationship hasn't changed. I still feel a lot of anxiety towards the future with my boyfriend. This relationship causes me so much anxiety that the only thing I can do to feel better is to be away from him. We don't live together, so that's easy, but we argue about money, if I'm still communicating with other males, and other pointless stuff. This weekend we went on a cruise and he disappeared for half the day because he wanted space. Is anyone else feeling like they're okay with just having a baby daddy and not a husband? This one kind of makes me cringe a little bit, to be honest. I can comprehend, I can imagine this feeling of being so desperate to have a child. Although she says of having another child, so she's probably had at least one child before. But I can get that, having this feeling of, man, this would be a really, really, I think it's a biological need for a lot of women as well. And I do think that you associate so many feelings with that experience of having a child that I can kind of get it. That said, I personally would not be behaving in such a way that it's possible for me to get pregnant if my relationship was in a bad place. And this sounds like it was a pretty terrible, it sounds like a pretty terrible relationship. I'm not sure there's any other way of saying it. She says, the relationship causes me so much anxiety that the only thing I can do to feel better is to be away from him. She had already decided that she wanted to break it off. And then she prayed to God to give her a sign that she should continue the relationship. And then she's treating now the pregnancy as a sign that she should continue being in a relationship with someone who is clearly not good for her. She says, we don't live together, so that's easy. So as far as I can tell from this picture, there's obviously a lot of context missing, but as far as I can tell, they weren't living together. It was not a very stable relationship. She was really desperate to have a child, so they decided to have unprotected sex, despite the fact that it was not a great relationship. And it seems like they both kind of just assumed, oh, it's never going to happen, without taking any precautions for it, which is also irresponsible in terms of bringing a child into the world. But hey, I guess it was kind of intentional on her end. And then the things that she says, we argue about money. We argue if she's still communicating with other males, which kind of implies that maybe there was some cheating in the past. At the very least, that there's jealousy. And then she says other pointless stuff, whatever that means. And then this image of the cruise and going on a cruise together with a person and then having that person take off for half the day kind of says a lot about the state of your relationship all by itself. So this is really unfortunate. Under those circumstances, I would never have wanted to get pregnant. The statement that she says, prayed for a pregnancy and forgot to pray for a husband, I kind of just don't understand that, because if I ever wanted to get pregnant, I would want it to happen in the context of a committed, stable, secure, long-term relationship, because those for me are kind of essential in terms of choosing to bring a child into the world. That said, now she is pregnant. I would have to break up with the boyfriend because it clearly isn't working, relationally speaking, for whatever reason that is. And then you have to do the best that you can with the child as he's there. And when she says, is anyone else feeling like they're okay with just having a baby daddy and not a husband? I'd probably say for the majority of people, that is a terrible, that's not a choice that they would have gladly made. And it's just an unfortunate circumstance that they ended in. But you have to come to terms with the situations that you find yourself in and then try to make the best of them for your child moving forward. This is a really, really, really unfortunate situation. I find it very sad. I think the relationship that she has here with God and prayer doesn't seem that healthy, which is also quite unfortunate, because if you're going to go to that extent, then I would hope that prayer also gives you some peace. But it doesn't seem to be the case. That's how I feel about this one. Now, unfortunately for OP here, quite a lot of people on the internet do agree with me. First person replies, so to be clear, you think getting a positive pregnancy test was a sign from God to stay in a bad, probably toxic relationship? And then OP says, I saw it as something, considering my track record of running away from relationships. My question was more geared towards advice on choosing to be a single mom and being okay with it. And yeah, OP, I understand. I feel bad for her that quite a lot of people come at it from this, including myself, come at it from this really judgmental angle. But honestly, the story that she paints, like the whole picture that she paints, is such a negative one that it's hard not to come out of it with a negative opinion of her. So yes, you can choose to be a single mom and be okay with it just because you have no other choice. And it's important to raise your child. And if part of raising your child is in being a single mom, part of raising your child, at least in a non-toxic household, is being a single mom, then that's all you can do for it. But it's quite unfortunate. Next person says, I always wanted to have a 2-parent home for my future kids as I wasn't given that in my childhood, but my relationship with my baby's dad caused me so much stress that I decided to separate from him before baby girl has come. Our relationship was rocky and nothing I did could change that. He was very emotionally abusive and eventually cheated on me. I knew that becoming a single mom would cause me stress, but staying with him would cause me so much more pain and isn't something I wanted to model to my daughter. Of course, I wish it could have gone a different way, but I did all I could and it all came down to me and my baby's health and stability before anything else. Congratulations on your baby. I hope everything works out for you. Exactly that. It's one of those situations you can't really do anything about it once you're there, except work with it and move on and try to find a better way to raise your child. But it's very much the lesser of two evils, and the other evil that's pretty damn awful is staying in the same relationship and just growing, like having your child raised, seeing toxic behavior and being around toxic behavior all the time. And that's so much more stressful, both for you and for the baby than it would have to be. The next person says, why would you try to have a baby when you're already having issues in your relationship? I've been with my boyfriend 11 years and we're barely having our first child together. We've had our ups and downs, but did not plan or try to have a baby until our relationship was stable and drama-free. Communication really helped us get to the amazing place we are in now. And that's honestly, I think, a good question. One person replies to this saying, this isn't exactly a helpful comment since she's already pregnant. She's asking for help and advice, not condemnation. Fair enough. She is asking for help and advice, not condemnation. But I do believe that every person who ends up in this type of situation should have this moment of self-reflection where they go, okay, what got me here? How did I end up in this situation? Why is my child in this situation? How should I behave in future that this doesn't happen to any future kids that I may have? Or that I can teach my child not to act in the same way so that she or he don't end up in the same situation. I think that that's a fair question. And then this OP actually replies to this and she says, I've spent a decade trying to figure if it's me. And this relationship has taught me some things are me and my anxiety. Nonetheless, when we discussed having a child, I knew exactly what I wanted. And at first it didn't include a family, which leads me to my question of not wanting to get married, but wanting a child. It's a little bit confusing to me as a statement. Honestly, I think OP was not in a good headspace and is probably still not in a very good headspace. And I'm not sure that getting advice on the internet is the best way to try and get into a better place when it comes to raising this baby. But it's really, really unfortunate. And I hope people learn from stories like this that this is not the way that you should be having kids. I think kids are awesome. And I think everyone should consider whether they want to have children or not. But I do think that at least trying to have some kind of stable relationship with the member of the opposite sex before you do that is probably a good way to that's the foundation. And then you can have as many kids as you want. And nowadays we have all of these tools available to us that make it possible for you to stop yourself from getting pregnant until you make a conscious, clear decision that this is what you want to do. And you can try and make that decision as a couple and not as an individual person who's desperate to have a child. I'm a little bit sad because she says, my dreams of having another child really would result in either going to a sperm bank or adopting. I think if I were her, I would have probably tried to adopt under those circumstances if it weren't possible for me to have my own kids. But it's really sad. It's really, really sad. Please make better decisions. Our next thread is titled, Am I Overreacting? Sister-in-law this time. #need to rant. My mother-in-law just came downstairs. We live in her basement, yelling that my 6-year-old got a package, and my first thought was, I didn't order anything. It happens to be that my sister-in-law, without checking with me first, ordered a new doll for my daughter. She called yesterday saying she'll like it and would love to have one. I'm angry because I'm trying to teach my daughter to work hard in school and at home for the things that she wants, or to put it on her Christmas list, and then maybe we'll get it for you. Mind you, my daughter's room already looks like a toy store because she's the only granddaughter on my parents' side and the only granddaughter and the youngest on my husband's side. Before, I didn't have an issue because she was too young to understand the concept of working for what you want. Couldn't my sister-in-law wait until later this month and give her the doll as a graduation present? We just went through a thing about making plans to take my daughter places without consulting with me or my husband beforehand. She just promised my daughter, I'm picking you up on Sunday and taking you to, leaving me no choice but to agree so I don't disappoint my daughter. I feel she just wants to be the cool aunt. She doesn't do that with her own child, like she doesn't have candy or processed food at her house, but loves to bring them to our house for my daughter. I'm going to be probably quite a little bit judgmental about this one too, but maybe it's unfair of me. My judgment comes from this perspective of expecting everyone around you to parent your daughter for you and not having the self-confidence to be able to raise your daughter with values that make sense to you, or to explain to her certain things and deal with her disappointment, or just manage the fallout when she has emotions about those things without everyone else in your family making it easy for you. In general, when it comes to parenting, I believe you are the central influence in your kid's life. At least when they're 6 years old, you are 100% the central influence on their life. And part of your responsibility as a parent is to explain to them the decisions that you make, to say no to them, to discipline them when it's needed, and to manage all of that despite the ways that other people interact with them. Now, that isn't to say I don't understand being frustrated if every single time your kid sees their grandparents or sees their aunt or sees their uncle, they are always giving gifts, and so they end up with this expectation and entitlement around gifts. I think under those circumstances, you can have a conversation with other adults in their life and say, hey, I understand why you want to give them gifts, and it's really awesome, it's really great, but kids been starting to get a little bit entitled and it's really not a good attitude, and I want to teach them a different attitude, and it's hard when you're working against me the whole time. I think that that's fair enough, having that level of conversation. I also think that you as a parent are completely within your rights to take gifts away from your children if you need to, and to say, hey, I know auntie bought you this amazing gift and you really want to play with it. You can have it, but then you have to choose another toy that you're not going to play with for now, and then I'm going to put that one away because you can't have too many toys out at the same time. For example, you can manage all of these situations however you want to manage them, and you can talk to your child. This particular situation that she says here, where she says, we went through a thing about making plans to take my daughter places without consulting me, because she says things like, I'm picking you up on Sunday and taking you to X. Now, from a communication perspective, I get being annoyed at that, but I also think it's completely fine for someone to say, hey, do you want to go to the zoo together? And for you to then step in and say, that's really awesome. We can organize that at a different date on this day. So for today, we're going to do something else. Learning how to manage your kids' disappointment, understanding that they're going to be disappointed sometimes, and that's okay. Understanding that they're going to be frustrated sometimes, and that's also okay. And just helping them work through those emotions is just part of being a parent, and that's okay. You cannot rely on the adults around your child to parent your child for you. So that's kind of how I feel about this one. I don't think it's such a big deal for her to buy her a gift. I understand wanting to teach your child the concept of working for what you want. And I think that you as a parent should be able to teach her that concept without getting super angry at her aunt for daring to buy her something. I don't think that that's the right way to behave, or the right attitude or mindset that you can have as a parent. Let's see what the comments say. First person says, I think you're overreacting. Sorry. Sometimes family buy gifts and we have little control over that. And then she gives an example of gifts that her mother-in-law gives her son. She says, I mean, he's 2. It's a little annoying, she says, as he now expects this every time. And on the odd occasion she hasn't got one, he looks in her bag for his car. I mean, he's 2 years old, but I feel it's a bit of a bad habit. And yeah, exactly. Once it gets to that point where it's habitual, I would definitely have a conversation with the grandparents to say, okay, look, this is really a problem. And I don't want him to associate you only with gifts. right? You want to try to build a relationship with your grandchild that's on a different level, that he appreciates your presence, he appreciates your advice, he wants to hang out with you, and that this is not attached to this materialistic expectation of, oh my God, I'm going to get a toy today. So to decouple that and for the health of your child and the health of their relationship together, I think that's a completely valid conversation to have with your grandparents, with your in-laws. But that's about it. In general, that there are some gifts that you might not want, and you have to manage that is pretty normal and pretty reasonable. Next person says, this is a you problem. I say that in the sense that it's your job to teach your kid whatever lessons you want. It's not the world's to give you a place to do that. So anytime you dictate others' actions that are not harmful to avoid having to deal with things that you're in the wrong. It's like being upset that a kid at school switched lunches with your kid and getting onto that kid. It's not the kid's job to make it easy for you to teach your kids about food choices. It's not your sister-in-law's job to facilitate this or any other family member either. Your kid will value working for things by working for them, not by only ever getting things they work for. The world doesn't mimic that reality. They'll get some free things. They'll get gifts and opportunities. So the point is to stop focusing on what others do when it comes to your parenting. Just parent your kid. Teach your little one how to value things given to them too. Teach them to show grace, teach them to donate, etc. And then OP says, it's true, my sister-in-law shouldn't facilitate my job as a parent, and now I see that's how it comes across. My issue is that she's doing something that wouldn't be acceptable in her view if it was her kid. Like with the candy. Oh, that has red dye in it, don't eat it. But she sends a basket of it to my daughter. And then this person replies, that's different. It's like a grandma giving her grandkid a cookie, but not if it was her child. Why? Because her kid would expect it every day. The grandkid sees her once in a blue moon, so it's a treat. We often treat others differently than our kid because they aren't our kids. Do we take our kids to the store every time we see them? No, because we see them daily. But a grandma may take a grandkid that she sees every 6 months. Parenting is a different role and requires much more rigidity and consistency. And so on and so forth. So yes, I completely agree with most of the comments on this one. I think it's tempting, and I think it's also one of the struggles, I guess, of being a parent is that you're always fighting against the influences that come from the outside. And those influences might be from other family members. Those influences might be from teachers. Those influences might be from their peer group. Those influences might be from the internet. But this is part of your role as a parent when it comes to setting boundaries that work for you and your child, and when it comes to instilling the right values in your child that you want them to have. So yeah, just a little bit of an overreaction. I get that it's annoying, but it's one of the struggles that you have to get through if you want to be a parent. The next one, mother-in-law signed up for Mummy and Me classes. Is that weird? My mother-in-law, who absolutely hated me until the baby was born, is now kissing my ass, has signed up for Mummy and Me classes. My sister-in-law is the one who told me, so I don't know details. I brought it up to my husband and he didn't think it was weird. He thinks if it's good for the baby, then who cares? But I feel it crosses boundaries, which she does all the time. Do you think that's weird? What I think is especially strange about this situation is simply that she didn't ask. I think some classes might be normal, might be acceptable to go to as a grandma. I don't think that there's any problem with that as a grandma with her grandchild. I don't think that there's necessarily a problem with that by itself. Yes, they're called Mummy and Me classes, but also it really doesn't matter if she's a caretaker or if she's spending a lot of time with the baby, or if she wants to have special bonding time with the baby and part of that experience is, I don't know, doing yoga together or something, then whatever, right? It's not a problem. What is kind of strange to me is that she would do this without saying anything. Also especially strange that the sister-in-law knew, and she told her, presumably, I guess, without knowing that the mother here doesn't know. There's a little bit of a strange situation. My image of it is that she kind of, like the mother-in-law just booked something and she spoke about it to her daughter. And then her daughter thought, oh, they must know. And then that's how it came up in conversation. But who knows, right? Who knows how that went down? Otherwise, the point at which it crosses boundaries is you cannot decide that you're going to take my kid to anything without speaking to me about it, right? That's a little bit obvious. So that's the part about this. It's a little bit strange. If the husband doesn't find it strange, then it seems to me like it may be possible they had some kind of rough conversation about it at some point in the past. if he's like, yeah, sure, she can take him wherever, then probably she knew that the husband would be okay with it, and then she just didn't talk to the mother about it. And yeah, okay, maybe that's its own problem, but then I'd probably say that the fundamental issue is that the husband and the wife here, the mother, are not on the same page with regards to what is acceptable in terms of how the grandma, how the mother-in-law here interacts with the baby or with the child. So that's probably where the issue is. In terms of, is it weird? I would want her to let me know, and I would kind of expect her to, and I would find it weird to be told from my sister-in-law. That's the part that I would want to talk to her about. Otherwise, I think it's okay. Now, I seem to be the only person who okay, there's maybe a couple of other people in the threads here who do think that it's kind of okay, so long as you speak about it first. A lot of comments are along these lines. It's very weird. Tell your husband she raised her babies, kids, teenagers. She had all the firsts and made her mummy memories. Now it's your turn. There is absolutely no reason for her to go to those types of classes. If she wants to do something helpful, she can get certified in infant CPR. And then the other comments, does she expect to take your baby to these classes? How does he not think it's weird for someone other than mum to sign up for the class, especially without talking to the mummy? Yes, you should maybe talk to the mother before you make plans with her baby, or at least with the dad, and then the dad should bring the mother in. Now, this is a really interesting part to this whole equation that only came up in the comments. One person says, is she managing childcare? And then she says, if not, I would just tell her no. OP says, no, she is not, but she stops by our house when the nanny takes care of her while I'm at work. Then a lot of people here reply, that's not okay unless she has written permission from you or your child to see your child while they're there. Another commenter says, I would let your nanny know that no one has permission to enter your home or take your child without your verbal consent that day. I would fire someone immediately if they let anyone into my home without my prior knowledge. And then the next person says, the poor nanny, I'd imagine that's very intrusive and awkward for her, having your mother-in-law coming by all the time to see your baby. While on some level that may suit you because you won't have to see her as much or deal with her, have you had an honest conversation with your nanny to see if they mind this? I hope they'd feel comfortable enough to tell you that they would prefer not to entertain mother-in-law during their work day. And then OP replies, that's a good point. I should talk to her about it. There is so much wrong with all of these comments to me. Number one, it's clear that the mother-in-law is available and free during the day. Now, I understand not wanting to rely on her for regular childcare, but under those circumstances, I would probably say, hey, it's okay to not be paying a nanny for a couple of hours so that the mother-in-law can hang out if she wants to hang out with her grandkid. And number two, the idea that the nanny is uncomfortable with the mother-in-law being present, therefore you should set up your house and structure everything so that the nanny is maximally comfortable. If the nanny is truly uncomfortable with having the grandma present, then that's a problem, in my opinion, on the nanny's end, because the nanny is getting paid to be present. Technically, if the grandma is there, then she's doing less work, so she's getting paid to do less. The suggestion that she's entertaining the grandma during her workday, like, I don't believe for a second that that's actually happening. So I find that a little bit strange. And the third one, it's all of the comments. No one has permission to enter your home, take your child without verbal consent. She is a grandma. She's not a random stranger. And I do think that it's different treating your grandma or treating members of the family as if they are people that you've never seen, people that the kid doesn't know, people that you don't want interacting with your child. I don't quite understand why everyone actively hates the mother-in-law so much in this situation. And it's a little bit strange to me that you would ever say, hey, she drops by, and then everyone's like, oh my God, this is such a huge problem. And then from that, OP says, oh yeah, maybe I should talk to her about that. Because clearly OP herself did not have a problem with it happening. It is just purely from the influence of other people that suddenly she goes, oh, okay, maybe there is really a problem with that. As far as I'm concerned, I would have a major problem, or I would at least have some anxiety about leaving my child with a nanny. And it would take a long time for me to be so comfortable with a person outside of my family, outside of our immediate family, to trust them that they can really handle my child, that they're not going to do anything that I wouldn't want them to do, and so on. Because they're a stranger, and it takes a long time to be comfortable with a stranger. I don't know what it is about relationships and families and grandparents these days, that this relationship that you have with an external person who you've hired, who you're paying, is so much stronger and so much more believable and so much more trustworthy for people than the relationship that they have with the grandparents of the child. I think that this is super sad and very strange. And now I know that OP says here, my mother-in-law absolutely hated me until the baby was born. And then she also says she crosses boundaries all the time. Now, with regards to mother-in-law absolutely hated me until the baby was born, maybe there was conflict there for whatever reason. We don't know what the reason for the conflict is. I know that pretty much everyone on this forum comes down hard on the mom's side, and I kind of understand where that's coming from. But maybe there's another perspective to this. And maybe the mother-in-law really worked on herself, really worked on her attitude, really worked on how she interacts with her daughter-in-law, and she kind of tried to get over it for the benefit of the child, because now she understands, hey, there's a grandkid. It's not good for me to be at odds with his mother all the time, so maybe I should change how I'm behaving. That's a potential different way of looking at this situation. And then she says, hey, she crosses boundaries all the time, but it's clear that the mother here has a completely different boundary to her husband, right? And if the husband is okay with it, then maybe the problem is that you guys aren't on the same page with regards to what is a boundary and what is not. And that's obviously going to be very confusing for the grandma. So why everyone came down so hard on the mother-in-law in this situation, I actually don't know. I mean, yes, okay, she signed up for some classes without saying anything about it, seemingly, but you can have a conversation about that. You can just talk to her about it. You can say, hey, my kid isn't going to be going anywhere without this. Everything else with regards to the nanny, I just found really strange and really sad and really depressing. And I don't know how we ended up in this place where people just don't have this type of relationship at all with their grandparents, with the grandparents of their children. But I would really hope that this is something that people work on for themselves, because it just sucks to be at odds like that all the time. And it definitely sucks for the kids, who will notice immediately the moment that they're old enough to pay attention to the interactions that you have with each other. They will definitely be able to tell that you're uncomfortable with the other side of the family. And that's not a healthy environment for a child either. So yes, it's a little bit weird to sign up for Mommy and Me classes, but maybe this mother-in-law is getting so excluded from her grandkid's life that she's looking for strange ways to be a part of his life and to try to spend time with him. Or her. I think it was a she. And now our final topic of the day. Boyfriend's friends traveling all South America and then coming back to live with us the week I give birth. Well, let's just start off by saying I was not thrilled to find out that my boyfriend's friends were coming back to live with us the week that I was giving birth and leaving 2 weeks later, which I feel is the most important time in my newborn's life and a struggling time for a first-time mum. We're both first-time parents, but to add to the plot, they're traveling all around South America and then coming back to stay with us, and my boyfriend doesn't understand that I'm terrified for people to be around my newborn, let alone people who just traveled for 3 months. I'm a first-time mum, so am I overthinking it? I've just always heard you want to limit how many people see and hold your newborn during the first 2 months of life, let alone people who are traveling in a different country. My boyfriend gets mad every time I bring it up, and I don't know how someone could not understand my worries and how I'm terrified to subjugate my defenseless child to people who are just traveling in another country. I assume she means I'm terrified to subject my defenseless child to people who are just traveling in another country, because that's a very different word. Any thoughts to tell me I'm crazy and I have nothing to worry about, or that I'm in the right and I should take precautions? I have so many questions about this. None of it makes any sense to me whatsoever. When she says the boyfriend's friends are coming back to live with us, that suggests to me that they were living in the same house for some time in the past. And if that is the case, then that's a pretty major part of context here that's missing. Because actually, if you kind of have like a roommate type arrangement with a bunch of other people, then I would not be so shocked to have them coming back. Then probably they have some right to the house that you're staying in. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when she says, I wasn't thrilled to find out that they're coming back. So it sounds to me like she was not consulted. She wasn't told. It just happened, or rather, it was decided without her knowledge and without her consent. And so that probably means that this is not your place, right? So it sounds to me like maybe she moved in with her boyfriend into an apartment where he was already living with a couple of other people. And then she got pregnant, and then they were lucky enough that those other people decided to go away for some period of time. So she had the expectation that she'd be able to give birth without having people around. That's what I'm guessing happened here. And if you read it that way, then I would probably say you don't have the right to privacy in this place, as far as I can tell. Hopefully you have at least a room that you can be, where you can just hang out with your baby and take it easy. But that's about it, right? Legally speaking, I don't know. I feel like there's a ton that's just missing here. When she says my boyfriend gets mad every time I bring it up. Now, either he does not care at all. He seems to not be taking it seriously at all that he's going to become a father. So that's a bit strange to me if it's not a big deal to him. Or there's a giant part of this argument that's completely missing here. And if it's something along the lines of they're also paying rent for this place, then I kind of get why he would be really angry at you, because there's nothing that he can do about them choosing to come back. That's just a living arrangement that you have. That's the only way that I can possibly find to read this. When it comes to fear about the baby getting sick, now, yes, in general, I get being scared that the baby's getting sick. And yes, in the first couple of weeks of life, first couple of months of life, babies are the most vulnerable that they're going to be for any illnesses. This is true. I would probably not be so worried about that versus just being around people, and presumably men, being around other random strange men who my boyfriend knows, but who are not my friends, who I don't want in my space during what is a really private time after a huge, major, life-changing event like giving birth to a baby, especially as a first-time mom. So I would be much more stressed out about having people in my space during that time rather than the fear of them getting the baby sick. Like, I would not be giving them my baby to hold, most likely, because within those first couple of weeks of life, babies sleep like 90% of the time, and then the rest of the time they're either nursing or you need to change their diapers, and that's about it. That's about all they do for the first 2 weeks. They don't do very much at all. So that's kind of all I would expect, and I don't think that they would expect to be interacting with a 2-week-old either. So I would guess that you're able to stay at kind of opposite ends of the apartment, and maybe you can stay in your room and your boyfriend can look after you and can help you out. But that's about it. It is very strange. This is a very strange living arrangement, and I don't know how you ended up here, OP, but I hope that you can maybe move out with your boyfriend, or at least find your own place with your boyfriend and your baby at some point as soon as possible, because this doesn't sound cool. Everyone else in the comments kind of disagrees with me, or at least didn't read any of that subtext into it. Maybe I'm just crazy. First person says, all I read was the title and it's a hard no for me. And then the next person says, hard no, put your foot down, you got this. Now, yeah, sure, if this is your place, then you can just say, no, I don't want people in my place, and that's it. But I don't think that you would not be consulted if people were coming over to stay at your place, to be honest. I don't think anyone would do that. That sounds completely strange to me. And then there's a lot of people who go on about how terrible the first couple of weeks postpartum are. She says, you'll be bleeding so much, especially that first week postpartum. Your boobs will literally be out constantly if you decide to breastfeed. You should also be doing as much skin-to-skin contact as possible with the baby those first few weeks, and you can't do that with other people in your space. And yes, all of this is true. But honestly, my first couple of weeks postpartum, I spent most of the time in my bedroom, lying in bed with my baby. And then I was fed and watered like a plant, pretty much. So that was nice from my side, but maybe that's a very rare experience for a lot of other people. And I know that other people by 2 weeks, they'll already be going to doctor's appointments and so on. But that's just, in general, OP, you should be able to plan what your first few weeks postpartum are going to look like by yourself. Your boyfriend should be a supportive partner and help you out during that time. I have no clue how you ended up in this situation where this is even a question that you need to have and a discussion that you need to have, but it sounds pretty bad. I guess I would talk to your boyfriend and try to sort it out, and maybe try to understand why he's not taking the fact that you're going to be postpartum all that seriously, because that's a little bit strange too. All right. If any of you disagree with any of my opinions about anything, then I am very happy to hear it. See you next time.